Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and we are back this week with another fun show planned for you guys. Thank you so much for your patience, as I know this has actually been 2 weeks since we've had a show. But we had a little bit of a scheduling issue / illness / allergies last week or the week before, and last week was my son's 3-year birthday. He's 3 years old now. So I took the whole weekend off, and I just you know what? I'm not doing anything except for spending time with my kid. So that's what we did. But we are back, and joining me this week, as always, my co-GM over at Hands of Fate, Stormzlord. How are you?
I'm doing good, Egg. How you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Ready to talk about the fun topic we've got tonight. And also joining us, the one, the only, the amazing Alpha Soul.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
I was a little worried there. I like the hand gesture, but I'm like, that doesn't really convey so well to the people who listen on, the RSS feed.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was just going to do a hand gesture, and then I remembered for a second there that there are people who listen to just the audio. So
yeah, yeah. So
you could do whatever hand gesture you want.
Yeah, you really could. They'd never
That's
know.
True.
Yeah, super secret hand gesture right here. Ooh. Yeah, you podcast listeners have no idea what I'm doing right now. Anyway, before we jump into the show, we got fun stuff to do. We are going to be talking about day and night cycles, as well as seasonal changes and how they could apply to Ashes of Creation. We also have a little bit of a mailbag if we have enough time to get to that. So I think this will be a fun show to talk about. So before we start, Patreon. Yes, that's right. We have new patron subs over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network, and that includes Tabitha Simpson and Ian Mance. There are 2 new patron subs this month. You guys rock. Thank you so much for supporting us, helping us keep the metaphorical torches lit, and I don't know, keeping the dragons at bay, I guess. You guys are great. Thank you so much for supporting us there. That does help go to the network and help us continue to do what it is that we do, and hopefully the shows continue to entertain you. So thank you so much. We also got just an amazing amount of iTunes reviews over the past 2 weeks, and I actually got my monthly update from our other stores as well that I want to hit up, because there have been a couple that were older, but I only get this little message once or twice a month, so it's kind of hard for me to find it, but it goes out and actually reads all the iTunes reviews on the other stores outside of US. So specifically, we had very nice podcast for the new MMO. It's a 5-star from Serwin from Canada. They said the host of this podcast is very knowledgeable regarding Ashes of Creation and MMOs in general. Aggelos' guests are great, and they have a fun time talking about the game. Makes for a nice listen while in the car. So thank you so much from the love from Canada, which is pretty nice. We also have one from Norway, I'm going to try to pronounce this, but he gave the title is 5 of 5. Hopefully he doesn't go back and re-edit this after I mispronounce the name, but it's King Hiawatha? Hiawatha. I think that's about as close as we're going to get from me. Thank you for this awesome podcast. Look forward to it on Mondays. Thought you guys needed some support. And it's, I guess, from Laptop Girl, because that's how they signed it in the thing. But it's King Hiawatha outside. Thank you so much. Much appreciated from Norway. It's nice. Hey, we have listeners in Norway.
Awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
That's nice.
Now, going back here, we also have a whole bunch from the U.S. store that I have to pull out. I think let's see here. 1, 2, 3 from the U.S. store. Amazing show from Admin Central. One of the best podcasts that I've listened to. Aggelos puts together a top-notch show. Keep it up. Dwyer, great show. If you're looking forward to Ashes, this is the show for you. Aggelos and his guests will keep you informed on all things Intrepid and Ashes of Creation. And finally, Stranger Stuff. Is that like Stranger Things?
That's what it reminded me
Nice
of.
stuff.
Best Ashes of Creation podcast. Absolutely the best Ashes of Creation podcast out there. This is the only place you need to go to get all of your Ashes of Creation news and discussion. Wow. Thank you, Stranger Stuff. Guys, that's so awesome because we have quite a few reviews out there, especially on the North American, not North American, but the United States store have 33 5-star reviews so far, which is pretty awesome for a show so early. So thank you so much. It really does help us. It lets people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. You guys are great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That does help us out so much. Guys, I've talked enough. Let's go ahead and jump right into our discussion. So this week, I brought up to the cast here that we want to talk a little bit about night and day cycles and how they are currently in MMOs, what other games have done, and then, you know, what we're hoping to see Ashes of Creation do. Followed up by a second discussion, which is going to expand on this a little bit more with the season. So it's going to be kind of like a two-part discussion. We'll do night and day cycles first. Most modern MMOs nowadays, night and day cycles really not much of anything. It doesn't mean anything other than the fact for a few minutes out of your day it is no longer bright and sunny. Everything is still bright, but it's just now kind of a shade of purple, I guess. And it doesn't really change all that much. But day and night cycles. How about we start with Stormzlord? What are your thoughts on day and night cycles in MMOs?
So depending on what level of day and night cycle they go with, it depends, right? So like ESO, you have a night cycle that's a little bit darker than day. The change to moons, right? So we see the moons, but they also have an effect on a couple of mobs, and you have werewolf or vampire, right? But other than that, there's not a whole lot of difference between day and night.
It's funny that you even said that because I completely forgot about the ESO's random mobs that give vampirism and lycanthropy only spawn at night.
I spent nights chasing them, so
yeah,
you have to.
In almost 5 years of playing the game, I've seen werewolves one time, and I don't think I've ever seen the vampires.
I've seen them 3-4 times in Bankerai when I was out running around for the werewolves, and the vampires are in that cemetery in Bankerai almost every night.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I trip over vampires over there all the time.
Van Helsing would have a heyday there, I guess.
He would, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
No, I've only found a werewolf one time in the Rift, and it was actually almost a surprise. I wasn't even looking for him. I was just kind of walking around, all of a sudden I'm getting attacked, and I'm like, I turn around, what is that? And then I seen in my status bar that I contracted the disease. I'm like,
Ooh,
that's what that is.
Yeah.
Nice.
A little off topic, but I'm hoping the next DLC has a little more about that. So
right. And if you're interested in hearing anything about that, you should check out our other show, Tales of Tamriel, which is our longest running podcast on the network, almost 5 years old. And I think we just did episode 172 of that show. So if you can't get enough DCN, maybe you should check there too, because that's a fun show. We really enjoy doing that. Alpha Soul, what about you?
Well, I'm kind of of the same mind. You really don't get to see in a lot of games the cycle, actually mean anything. I don't think even in ESO, I didn't ever see, really it mean much. I didn't get to see the werewolf cycle or anything like that. The more recent game, and it's not an MMO, that I thought it was, kind of fun in was Sea of Thieves, but we all kind of know what happened with that.
I didn't play Sea of Thieves. I know you guys, a lot of people in our DCN community.
It was neat.
Yeah. Again,
it didn't last long, but it was neat.
It was neat.
Yeah.
It was definitely neat from what I hear. But since we're actually going to get into that discussion, I have a few games as well in mind. Alpha, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how Sea of Thieves handled day and night cycles? What did it actually mean? Barring the fact that Sea of Thieves just didn't have anything to do after the novelty wore off.
Yeah, so the way it worked with Sea of Thieves is the night cycle, obviously when it turned night, it would get extremely dark, right? And when you got dark, you needed some sort of light source in order to navigate around, because you're primarily piloting ships and kind of going around. So using a light source actually did make it much easier to see. The flip side to that is if you used a light source, other players could see you, and you stuck out like a sore thumb amongst like the horizon, and it was a really easy way to see other ships. So if you had your light source on, you could see really well, but other people could see you really well as well too. So the reason why I liked it was it had a point to it. It wasn't just, it got darker and okay, that's just fluff. There was a real consequence to it being night.
Oh, a huge consequence.
And I'm glad you brought that one up, because I have a few things to say on that a little bit later. The one game that I kind of thought of, I wrote down a few different games as well, that I saw day and night cycles seem to have an effect. And up until like what Storms mentioned with ESO, I know you mentioned ESO having just a slight thing, which was the vampires and werewolves, which I didn't even have on my list because it was so minor and such a just a little part of the game that it never really kind of stuck with me, that I just forgot completely about it. But most of the day and night cycles tend to stick with single player game, non-MMOs, non-persistent worlds, because the ones I have on here is obviously Castlevania. If anyone's ever played the old Castlevania games, we'll get into that. Minecraft has some stuff, which I know, Storms, you could probably talk to us a little bit. Minecraft, since I know you and your children tend to play that, right?
Yeah, when 5 years ago, when they were 10 and 11, we played a lot. And when you're during the day, you can do what you want to do. But if it's night or you're in a cavern, that's when the monsters come out. Right? So if you have a light source, they don't come into the light source, but they stay out. If it's dark and your stuff goes out, then all of a sudden they start coming in, right? So it's a huge thing to have light protecting what you have in that game when you played it.
Interesting. I know. Well, the other game that I have on here was Dying Light, which is a survival game. And as I think about it, I'm actually going to mark this down here because while I had some other ones, I know H1Z1, which you could argue is a MMO-ish. It's a survival game. I know. That one, there were always zombies and stuff like that in H1Z1. During the day, they were out there. But at night, that's when they started doing swarm attacks. Like, it just felt like that's when there was an increased spawn of them. I specifically remember playing it with my wife at one time, sitting on the top of a hill, right? And just fighting off tons of these zombies coming at us because we hadn't built our structure yet until nightfall. We ran out of time, and we're sitting there with like a half-built fort trying to defend it from these zombies. It was insane, the amount of zombies that were coming at us. It was like kind of like that scene in the second or third season of The Walking Dead with the farm, where like you're standing out there shooting at the zombie. They just keep coming. It was a mess. But I just thought of H1Z1. Dying Light was sort of that way as well, where things got a lot harder. Going back real old school, Castlevania, that game, obviously you had monsters the entire way through it, but there was this, I don't know if you guys have ever played this before. I know that most of the people you have, all of us here on the show are of an age range where we would have played it. A lot of the people in the Ashes of Creation community, however, I know there's a lot of younger ones out there. This was probably before their time, but you remember you're playing that, you're just jumping around, you're killing zombies, you're whipping, doing your whip, and all of a sudden that everything stops, and that text appears across the screen. That it's a bad time for such a cold night or something like that. And it came across, and you're like, no, because that's when everything got insanely hard. Like, it was insane. You got that text that as soon as that text came across, you're like, no, no, no. And it popped randomly. It wasn't a set time. It was sort of random. And I specifically remember going through castles, kind of being low on supplies, trying to make my way out, and all of a sudden it popped up. I'm like, no, this is the worst possible time for it to go night. Because then you're sitting there having to fight all the harder monsters and everything of that nature, while you were already in a weakened state just trying to get the heck out of Dodge, right? And, oh, it was nuts. But you don't really see a lot change in MMO sphere. Like, I feel like they don't know how to make it work, right? Because most of the time, day and night cycles are tied to real life time, whatever it may be. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, however you want to do it. And I feel like people don't want to make that change in case, because if they let's just say argue that it's 4 hours, right? So 4 hours of the day it's nighttime, 4 hours is daytime, and it just kind of rotates in that. So you have 3 day and 3 night cycles. What if during that 4 hour time you always sign on at the exact same time? So unless they skewed it, you may always get nighttime.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm pretty consistent when it comes to my time. Everyone knows that, you know, I have a kid and whatnot, so I don't get on until he goes to bed. Even all of our shows, I'm like, it ain't happening until at least 8 o'clock at night, right? So, and that generally is around my playtime, right? 8 to about midnight. Maybe a little longer, but then the next day I'm really, really chugging on the caffeine to make it through the day. But, you know, 8 to midnight, 4 hour span. If I always hit that at nighttime, and they made changes, I feel like that's why MMO developers haven't done much with night, because they don't want to alienate a group of people if they can only sign in during a very specific time. What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, look at the way games, they vary the cycle too, and not just they vary, but they make the cycle shorter, so that you get maybe a 72-minute night or an 8-minute night or a 20-minute night, depending on the game you're playing. You get that change. It doesn't really matter when you log on. You're going through the cycle at least once probably when you're on.
Yeah.
It's a way of looking at it. I can't remember the cycle Skyrim had, but it had a cycle of day and night as well.
Yeah, but remember with Skyrim, because it was a single-player game, if it was night and you didn't want to deal with night, you literally went rest. How long do you want rest? 4 hours.
Rest 8 hours. There you
it's
go.
The same with
what I did all the time.
The Witcher as well. It's like you got nighttime and you're like, well, what do I want to do? I'm going to rest 8 hours, you know, till morning, dawn, dusk, whatever. Because they
absolutely don't have that choice here.
No, you don't. Because they actually, in The Witcher, they had a mechanic in place where certain monsters obviously would only spawn at night. If you were hunting a vampire or something like that, it's not going to spawn in the middle of the day. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So you had to wait till nighttime. So, and however long the time period was, you could speed it up automatically by going, I'm just going to, go into my menu and say skip ahead. You can't really do that in an MMO sense. So, going back to MMOs, 2 recent MMOs that are in production right now, they're both indies. Saga of Leucemia, which we do a show on as well, called Tavern Talk. You can see it on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. That is in conjunction with their development team, so that's always a fun show to do as well. And the other one is Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, which is Brad McQuaid's EverQuest reboot, essentially. I know he probably doesn't say that, but it's an EverQuest reboot. They're both trying to bring back the idea of nighttime as well and trying to give it some meaning. But I know Saga of Leucemia, their shtick with nighttime is just nighttime is super dark. They even did an entire series on their YouTube called Darkness, which was just about the nighttime cycles within Saga of Leucemia. And it's pretty impressive. Like when they turn on the night, if you don't have a torch, you're not seeing very far at all. It's not just like a slightly darkened MMO, right? Like World of Warcraft, everything has the purple hue in it, but there's really not much change. This is pitch black. Like, you can get lost very easily. And the fact that they don't have any mini-maps in that game makes it extra hard because you may miss landmarks in the night. So, but they're doing night. Pantheon's also doing something similar to that where you'll have to bring torches. But is that the only thing you can do with nighttime?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it's always the balance of trying to make sure that it's not annoying or detracting from gameplay and adding to it instead.
Right. Do you think that the adding torches would just... I know everyone kind of likes that. I know when I was doing the Saga of Leucemia alphas and stuff like that, it gets dark. I always loved doing the, the /T torch or whatever and bring it out and walk around with this torch. Just so few MMOs either don't have it, or if they do, it's just a little flare of a torch. But I can tell you one thing. One of the things that Saga of Leucemia is doing is they literally want at nighttime someone to be the torchbearer. Like, they don't fight. That's what they do. They hold the torch.
Yeah.
And I really don't want that job. Now,
I'm not sure what else you can do at night besides it's dark, and you get different versions of things that come out of the night, and the jump factor, right?
Right.
Take, for instance, another single-player game, Doom 3, right? You had a flashlight that it only went so far, right? And the same thing with the torchlight. It's only going to go so far. So it depends, whatever's coming after you, how quickly can I move that distance between what you can see and what you can't?
Yeah. No, I agree with that, but you also kind of lose a little bit of those jump shocks when you're not in first person. If you're playing a game like Fatal Frame or what was the other one? Oh, I have a video of my wife playing it and she's panicking. It's so funny. What is... Oh, I cannot remember it. It was... You're in like a mental asylum or something like that. It's a single-player game. I can't remember it right now. It's going to bother me. But I actually have a video on my phone of her playing it. She's like just I'm watching her from the side, and she's playing with the... She's like standing up and sitting down, standing up and sitting, because she can't sit still because she doesn't know when something's going to come at her. And you go into a dark basement, and you're sitting there with a light, and you're like, you can't see anything. And all of a sudden you turn around, and there's just like a zombie or something like right there at your face. Yeah, that was a fun one. But it's hard to get those jumps.
You're right.
There, I'm sorry. If a zombie or something, like, I see those in playing Diablo 3, for instance. You've got some dark areas, and all of a sudden something will crawl out at you. I can't think of any time where even when something popped out, I was like, "Ooh, scared," because that isometric or third person gives you that layer of disconnect.
That's interesting, but movies don't, right? Or sometimes, right? Movies don't seem to. Is it the atmosphere that we aren't building in the third person? Because movies aren't usually first person either, but that's interesting.
It's true, they're not. But movies have like a forced perspective, right? You're still kind of looking at exactly what they want you to look at. Whereas from a third person, you have all this environmental data to kind of, I don't know if I want to say separate your mind from it. Like, you got your UI, you got your mini map, you have your inventory open,
right.
You have all this other sensory data that doesn't allow you to be this hyper focused.
Distract you from it.
Yeah.
Interesting thought.
Yeah, that would be my thought.
Take it away and make people work. There you go. Take all that other way when it's night. You don't have all this stuff, right? So.
In night, you're forced into first person.
Or that you have that fog of war with darkness around. You lose the UI and you have the third person view, but you're only inside that torch. I need to write this down. I want to do this. So it's
I like that idea that you just brought up, even from a third person perspective. All right, taking all that away, because this is kind of what can Ashes of Creation do to make nighttime more. We already talked about the pitch black thing. Like, yeah, okay, makes sort of sense if someone has a torch or whatnot, but it's interesting in a game like this because in like Saga, they're doing it like a tabletop role-playing game, right? So having someone hold a torch and that literally be the only thing they can hold without putting it down, yeah, okay. In these more action-oriented MMOs, you'd never drop your weapons, right? Like, you just have this little light around you, and that's your torch. But Storm's had a fun idea. Losing your map, or if there's a mini-map, losing your mini-map during night to kind of give you that sense of, I have no idea where I am.
Interesting.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything like that before, but that while that's neat, that does kind of go into what Alpha Soul was saying. Does that go into the level of, wow, this is just annoying?
Could be. Personally, I don't play the minimap. I don't use it even in third person, but that's an interesting thought. I did take a note. I'm going to play with that idea of how to make third-person perspective, a little more intense of an experience like that. That's interesting.
I mean, the screenshots we've seen of Ashes of Creation doesn't seem to appear a mini-map anyway. They use the compass similar to what Skyrim does. So
True.
And I shouldn't even say Skyrim. Because Skyrim kind of gives you these icons on your map. We haven't seen it. Like, theirs is a legit compass. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I would like to see some more stuff, like having monsters tied to spawns during certain times of the day. Like what ESO had, now that you mention it. I think that was neat. Vampires only coming out at night. Like, maybe the mobs change. Like, a camp that you had been there before changes. One thing that would be really kind of neat, and you see very little of this outside of towns, but what about at night if things go to bed? You know, different monsters, like you have your diurnal and your diurnal and nocturnal animals, right? Okay. Panthers, for instance, I think they're nocturnal. You can still find them during the day, but they're in their dens. At night, they're moving around.
They're lethargic during the day.
Yeah, the bandit camp, it's active and moving around and stuff is happening, right? You see this in towns, like where they change their routine. NPCs will be active during the day and then they kind of wander off at night. MMOs are a little harder with that because they don't want people to not be able to access merchants during certain times, which, whatever. But what if that bandit camp is now asleep at night and there's just less guards? That would be a fun mechanic because, okay, during the day you can pull a lot of people, you know, because there's so many of them. But at night there's only a few sentries. If you find the sentries, they wake the entire camp up and you pull the entire camp. You know, change how the aggro works at night. I think that's kind of neat.
That's a neat idea.
You know, during the day they might go, there's a couple people can handle that, not a big deal. But at night, a sentry sees one person. They don't know if it's one person or 1,000. They raise the bell, and the entire camp aggro's on you. That would be kind of neat.
That's a neat idea.
Yeah.
Especially for humanoid NPCs, at least. That'd be something cool to see. Nighttime affecting stealth.
So then I think it should. I mean, intuitively, you think about stealth, and it should. I mean, it's darker. It's easier to conceal oneself. Therefore, stealth should be easier.
But it's tougher because you can't have light if you're stealth, so you can't see as well.
Right.
So that again, another interesting way around that. Again, this is a deep, dark system. Not to make a pun, but right. So that's an interesting, deep level system to add things like that to it.
Now, conversely, during the day, should stealth classes be at a disadvantage for stealthing?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's light, you know?
Yeah.
So there should be an effect on it, right? There should be an effect. Now, if they're using a potion, not so much. But if they're using just stealthy, I'll stand here and you won't see me, you know, that's obviously not going to work as well.
Right.
As well, if you think about what the person is wearing, right? It doesn't affect, and the games I've seen, what they're wearing isn't affecting their ability to stealth.
So what I'm wondering is, did they, I completely forget if they had touched on what the Ranger did. Because if you have these night cycles, and you have these classes like, you know, your stealth classes and things like that, theoretically you can have your Ranger class or even your stealth classes excel at things like tracking specifically at night or something of the sort, where you can find another player much easier if you have the skill level to do it, and you could see footprints or whatever the case may be and be able to track that person or home or locate that or some other person via that way. There's a potential to have a whole skill set at excelling at night if it's truly debilitating at night.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting idea.
They've kind of shown, and I think I'm trying to remember where I heard this before, but I almost feel like they've said that stealth isn't going to be like some of the other MMOs where you're 100% invisible. Stealth is you're going to be sort of visible, but not really. Kind of like that Predator-esque looking. So in the daytime, it would be a lot easier. Maybe you can even see shadows in the daytime. Like, you might not be able to see the person, but you see a shadow. Whereas, you know, in nighttime, that's no longer the case, and it's much harder to see someone in stealth without having a light. And I know all the stealthers out there are going to hate me, but I hate the idea of the invisibility. Your stealthing should literally be, okay, I'm hiding behind a building, right? Like, that's what stealth is. You shouldn't be like, when we're playing ESO and we're going through Imperial City and all of a sudden some guy pops out of the middle of the street and attacks us. That annoys me. Stealthing should be they were tracking us across the street and you can see them looking at us from inside the building and then all of a sudden jumping out of a window at us. I honestly don't think they should have stealth at all. Like,
well, they need to have stealth.
Why do they?
Why? I think a natural type of stealth, because that's part of the gameplay.
No,
part of PvP in world and games is stealth.
Yeah, but stealth could literally be you just hiding.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. You hide in the environment. You real stealth, not just use invisible.
Yeah, real stealth, hiding in the environment. So like, let's look at first-person shooters and stuff like that. They don't have stealth, but what they don't have is they also don't have nameplates above the head that you can see. So during
so you can blend in the environment. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's something that's kind of interesting.
You don't have like a purple-colored horse, right? You want to.
Oh yeah, you don't. You
wear something to blend in, right?
That sparkle horse. Yeah, you don't ride that. No. But yeah, I don't like the idea of clicking a button and being invisible. I think stealthing should actually be stealthing. But in that regard, I think there should also be things that you can quote unquote hide in, for instance. Like what ESO does with some of their systems of hiding in baskets.
Oh yeah.
I think from a player perspective, awesome. I think that should be a thing that can happen. But then when you go into a basket, people have the option of, let's say, attacking the basket.
Let's look in the basket.
Look in the basket, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great technique.
I would love to see that from a stealth system where a player can literally jump in a basket and they can hide in that basket. And it's up to you whether or not a person walking by goes... And maybe this could also play on your tracking skills. Like a ranger could use a tracking skill in a player versus player environment and go... I sense that somebody has gone through here, anything like that.
That basket just sneezed.
Oh, yeah. I would love if they did something like that rather than the standard MMO stuff.
No, that's a good idea.
But does that turn the world into a Legend of Zelda world where you just massacre every basket you see on the off chance that there might be somebody in there?
I mean, let's look at ESO. Do you not loot every basket out there to see if there's something in there, like a motif page? You maybe did at first, but I can tell you what. At first. There's a lot of baskets that I run right by because I'm like, I'll probably just get freaking rice again, Like, yeah, at first you get that sense of, I can look in every basket. That's amazing. But then eventually you go, all right, the odds of me finding something good are just like astronomical. I really don't need any more grains of rice. And you just move on, And you very well could have missed something, like that player hiding, or the fact that someone hid treasure in there. Like, those are things that it's the, I guess, risk versus reward. Risk in boredom, like, am I really just looking in there for a grain of rice? Or I looked in there and all of a sudden there's an Alpha Soul hiding in there going, oops, don't look at me. Oops, these are not the rice you're looking for. Like, that... Yeah, I think there would be a sense of everyone wanting to look in every basket, but eventually, are you really going to take 50 minutes to examine every single basket every single time you walk into town? Probably not. First time, yes.
But then again, that adds the whole, that's what maybe a sentry should do.
Absolutely.
Right? So these sentries would do that, right? So I think it adds a layer of complexity that would be interesting.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I'm big on stealth actually being stealth, and it's just like, hey, I'm hiding in the trees, and I just didn't see that player. I mean, we've done that before in ESO where it's not even a stealth character. All of a sudden, you run around a corner, and all of a sudden, there they are. It's like, whoa. And maybe that is something that there's the MMO stealth, sort of. If you go into an area with shadows, you can crouch down and then your outline fades, and maybe then you're just an outline, because then it's concealed in shadow. But if you move out of that shadow, all of a sudden you're visible again.
Yeah.
I just don't think you should be able to stealth in broad daylight and no one can see you till they're right there. That's just stupid. But anyway.
Well, what if instead then that it's something like, let's say we go with the idea there's no stealth, you don't go invisible, there's no way to do that. Sneaking. If you have a mechanic where, again, night actually matters, you can't really see much, but you can hear footsteps, sneaking could potentially muffle your footsteps as you're running around through the world, etc. Or call it light stepping or something like that.
Right, because then you have to put into play what is the character wearing. Right. So when you're going to be stealthing, sneaking, and in the real world, you're going to wear things that will be stealthy, not chainmail.
Nope.
Right.
I'm wearing my big necklace, my big chain necklace. I'm going to look like Mr. T with my 50 necklaces. No, that's not going to happen. All right. Well, we've talked about day and night cycles. Let's go ahead and move on to the second half of this, which is kind of the same thing-ish. Not really, but it's the idea of cycles, but this is actually seasonal cycles. The one thing we do know is that they've said that they want to do seasonal cycles. One of the things we saw during the Kickstarter was the idea that the seasons would change. We've seen the season change in like their speed videos or whatnot, and we've even had during interviews where Steven's like, during the winter, certain roads may, you may no longer be able to pass that way because there's avalanches. Or, hey, you can now go across that frozen lake because it's frozen, Things will change with the season, and that could also affect certain things like harvesting crops and things of that nature. So, changing
that would be interesting.
Of the seasons.
If it affected crops, right? So your nodes come up differently in a different season. To me, that's interesting. I was thinking other patterns deeper, but that's an interesting thought about it. What if during the winter season you don't get as much wheat, you get more of something else?
I mean, yeah, no, that there are definitely more like winter and summer type crops that would harvest around. My phone went nuts on me over there. Alpha Soul, what about you? Date or seasonal cycles in MMOs?
I haven't seen it done well so far. One thing that I would really love to see in some game coming up is if you're going to do a season, winter specifically, and you run around in snow, I think you should move slower during it. I mean, mechanics, it's always been traditionally harder to, fight, to wage wars in the winter, specifically because of the cold, because of the environment, snow, ice, you name it. And if you have mechanics that really, truly affect that, I think there's a potential to have, your environment and the season specifically dictate and, or not dictate, but affect the outcome of potential fights and wars where you'd be less likely to fight in the winter for those reasons or attack in the winter for those reasons.
I absolutely agreed. That's what I was thinking. When I was thinking earlier about it was the effect of not necessarily the season, but the weather effect on the environment. When you're going to attack a castle or you're going to go do a siege, you're not going to pick dead of winter to do the siege unless there's a reason you have to. You're going to pick summer. You're going to pick late summer to do that, not in the spring when there's rain, not in the winter, but unless there's a reason. Look at the way in ESO, one of the Rift locations, you have a tremendous effect of weather against you. You go in there to get this Sky Shard, you have to actually run between campfires as you start to freeze as you go along. Now, maybe not that drastic, but it would have an effect on your abilities, your movements, all things like that.
As soon as you said the Rift, I'm trying to put it in my head going, where? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's like, what is that? The one dragon rune you can go into. Yeah. Yep, I remember it now. From a single-player perspective, there's not a lot of games that actually do seasons. It's all kind of relegated. Even one, Skyrim, for instance, you could the days pass. You could go entire years and the weather never change. MMOs are similar. They tend to relegate weather to a zone where if it's a snowy zone, it's always just snowy. You know, winter, spring, and WoW, it's always snowy. Doesn't matter what time of year it is. You know, you go to Korthus in Final Fantasy XIV, it's always snowy. You go to Hrothgar in the northern half of Hrothgar in ESO, it's snowy. You know, like that's just how they kind of deal with it.
One of the battlegrounds in ESO, I just played it yesterday for the first time, and there is snow and there's blizzard conditions that go in and go out based on the wind, and it's changing, right? So you can see a lot less when you have that blizzard blowing through and you're in Hrothgar, and that's a major effect on visibility. Now you could affect other things like ice and things like that, but just imagine you start the battleground and it's pretty clear. You know, it's Hrothgar, it's sunny, you know, but snowy, but sunny. But then all of a sudden, 2 minutes into it, there's a blizzard that comes through. Visibility is down to 5 or 6 feet. You're just guessing where everything is based on the map.
Right. Now, from, you know, modern MMOs, whenever we see seasonal changes, like I'm thinking like Christmas time, they tend to put snow. Guild Wars 2 has snow in the capital cities during Christmas, but it's during a patch. They put it out. World of Warcraft, there's snow in some areas because it's Christmas.
Star Trek Online had one in the Winter Planet.
In the winter.
They had the wizard, they have the blizzard, and so same thing, right?
Yeah.
So they do that.
But very few MMOs actually are doing anything with seasons. Now, Ashes of Creation have said they're doing it. 2 other MMOs I wanted to talk about that actually are also playing with the idea of seasonal changes. First off being Crowfall, and the second is Chronicles of Illyria. 2 other indie MMOs. I'm more interested in Chronicles of Illyria than I am in Crowfall, because Crowfall is just a PvP only game, and quite honestly, well, we'll get into. I think I had this discussion. I won't say it's an argument because it was amicable, but we were talking about Crowfall really being an MMO, and I said technically I would say no, because the worlds aren't permanent, because they die. That was their idea, is that the characters are permanent and then the worlds die. And I'm like, well, what's any different than playing League of Legends? When you have a character, it's permanent, but the game ends. You know, like then we got into a whole Eternal Kingdoms versus, you know, the game. But anyway, Crowfall to me is an MMO light. That's about all you're getting from me. But what Crowfall's doing is each one of its campaign worlds starts in spring, and as time goes by, now there's only one season, or not one season, but one cycle. It's not like it rotates around, because once winter is there, in pure Game of Thrones fashion, winter is coming and then the world ends, right? Because winter represents this hunger that like destroys the world. As the seasons change, the resources become less, things become more dangerous. As it gets closer to winter, the monsters get harder. The hunger starts advancing and starts throwing its mess in the way, like these hunger crystals that spawn apparently and change the wildlife into monsters that weren't there before. You're like, hey, that deer, that's friendly, and all of a sudden, when did that deer get giant fangs? You know, like that's how it advances.
They're not watching Game of Thrones.
No, yeah. Quite honestly, when you look at Crowfall, it's Game of Thrones, almost like a complete ripoff of Game of Thrones in terms of theming. Because as winter, you start seeing, like, they showed a wolf get turned into this ice wolf. I'm like, hey, it's a White Walker. You know, like, anyway.
They're going to get in trouble.
Well, I mean, that's kind of their whole shtick on the whole thing. I mean, I think even during their Kickstarter, when Game of Thrones is still popular, but when their Kickstarter came out, it was like season 3 or 4, so it was kind of like at the height of the Game of Thrones hype. Now we're kind of winding down because it's near the end of this. I think, probably didn't help. They're going 2 years between season 7 and the final season. But anyway, this is not a Game of Thrones podcast. But they even made jokes about that, like that the Game of Thrones, you know, they even call it a Throne War simulator. That was what the title was on Kickstarter. Again, not a Crowfall podcast either. But the seasonal things are kind of neat how they're going to affect the game world. The one thing I know they did mention was that the seasons would probably change with like a maintenance. It's probably not going to be something that will be dynamic. And I know Ashes of Creation has mentioned that when they do seasons, it'll probably just be something where whatever their predetermined time is, every third week we're going to do a server maintenance. We'll take the server down, and all of a sudden now it's summertime instead of spring. Or I don't think we'll see anything dynamic. So,
I'm holding my tongue.
Huh?
I just don't like that. I just think that's and personally, I think that's a cheap way out around the seasons. I think there's some very good use for the seasons if you do it dynamically.
Right.
If you don't, then it's like, why are we doing it this way, right? So it just, personally, I do it differently.
Right. And actually going into, I'm bringing Chronicles of Illyria up again, not just because I prefer their art style over Ashes of Creation, which I think I've said in our Discord several times, because they're going super realistic looking. It looks beautiful and unreal. In one of the earlier videos they showed, it was a snow pile-up demo where it was actually showing snow fall, and while the character was walking, the snow piled up.
Oh, interesting.
That was neat to see. Like, there were plants and everything, and they're just walking, and they're walking up the road, and the snow's falling, and you see the snow fall, right? And at first it's just falling in the sky. The grass is still green. But you actually, as they're continuing to walk, you see that the landscape changes around them. That was insanely neat, and I thought that would be something that it would be cool to see. But do you think Ashes would be able to do something like that? Do they have the tech in place? I don't think they do.
It's hard to say yet, but I don't think so. I mean, they're using the same engine.
They are.
Right? So it is possible. But I don't think, based on what I've heard, that they have gone to the route that would allow them to do that.
Right. And is this just a matter of they don't want to go that route because and again, Chronicles of Illyria doesn't even have anything playable for its people yet, so you could really argue that, vaporware kind of deal. We're not going to do that because we like indie MMOs around here. Is that tech that they showed off during Kickstarter? We've not seen any new videos with that. Is it something that they can even pull off in Unreal going forward?
And you could pull it off. It's a question of
can you pull it off in an MMO though?
Well, again, it's what you want to put on what weight you want to put on the client and the weight you want to put on the servers. You have to be cognizant of every single thing you put on each, and that might be too much. I don't know.
But really, let's step back here and let's analyze this from a technical perspective, because we're all here. We're all fairly technical. I know Storms and I are technical. Alpha Soul is very proficient as well. When it comes to the snow falling, what is it really doing? It's putting in. Let's go with Alpha Soul's idea that it slows you down. What's any different than just randomly putting, if you're within this radius, it's just a debuff of slow movement? And two, a graphical change. Is the server pinging that? I don't think so. I don't think it's actually calling back and forth. It's not like doing an ability and figuring out that, oh, it's registering data here. It's a graphical change. It's a spell effect.
So I agree with the debuff, right? That's where you'd want to plan how that changes things. The environment affects you. When you have the snowfall, right? If it's building up, you are either adding additional polygons or you're switching polygon structures as you go.
Is it really? Like, from the pile-up perspective, in the video it just showed the ground go from snowy green to white. Like, is that more than just a mesh being added, or?
Well, it depends how they play it out,
yeah.
Right? Is this when you're gonna you either mesh it to it, right? So it's gonna be a blanket, and you just change the up and down and all that. You can do that, right? But if you're also gonna have it affect other things, you're gonna affect footprints. You're gonna fill in footprints. That you got to figure out. Well, that's gonna be more. That's gonna be contextual of not only the graphics on the client, as well as the server has to know those footprints are getting filled in. So it has to be aware of it as well. Not necessarily in a graphical format, but in can somebody pick that up? It all depends how they're going to play it.
See, and I don't
But
think
again, this is really deep. I don't think they're going to go this far.
no, I don't think anyone would go that far to the point where, okay, yeah, you'll leave footprints in the snow, but how much of that is just a character graphical that disappears when you're so far away? World of Warcraft leaves footprints in the snow, but they disappear after a few steps because it's all just a character leaving a. It's the server doesn't care that it's there. It's actually an effect off the character itself, not actually an effect on the world. Yeah.
But if it has an effect on the world, then it's got to be in the server too. So
Well,
it depends
but the effect,
what they're going to do in the system.
But the effect on the world would only be the debuff in the area, saying that it's slowing down. Everything else would be client side, especially if it's just a graphical change.
Depends how they lay it out.
Okay.
Right. So again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to think through what are the permutations of what could be going on, because you got to realize just with just a debuff, you can slow down. What's going to happen when you get slippery and all that sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you start then working through that, what effect would it have? I haven't done enough thinking through what that would occur, but it's interesting.
Yeah. No, definitely. But while that's interesting, and the fact that I think Ashes is just going to go with the whole server maintenance, and now all of a sudden it's summer, fall, winter.
Mm-hmm. They will.
Is that the easy way out of this? Or are they just what we talked about earlier, the path of least resistance of it gets the job done in a way? How many people are really going to waste the time going, wow, that snowfall's pretty cool? I mean, I'm not going to lie. When I watched the Ashes, or not the Ashes of Creation, the Chronicles of Illyria video with the snowfall, I'm like, oh, that's pretty awesome. But eventually I think that would be lost on me. Like the first time it'd be like, whoa. After that, would it really play as much of effect? In Ashes, probably not. Chronicles of Illyria, maybe so, because they're more of a survival type MMO, because you have to worry about being cold and food and stuff like that. But Ashes, do I care once the ice bridge forms? Probably not. You know, like first time I'm always visually astounded, like, oh, that's so cool. But then it's like, hey, there's the ice bridge. We're good to go. We can now walk across that frozen lake.
Right. And then, so when you talk about, and that's point, when you're switching from seasons to season, what is the effect on the environment? Right. So are there flash floods? Are there, what's going to happen to the town if all of a sudden all that snow melts? Right. Or if there's an avalanche because somebody woke some tier 1 epic monster up, right? Yep. And there's an avalanche cause. So what's that going to do when A, it falls into the town? B, at the end of the season, you get this huge lump of snow because they don't have snow plows, and they're not going to melt. What's going to happen with it?
Oh, they have snow plows. So it's called your child with a shovel.
That's right. With a broom. Get out there. So that is probably why they would take, or anybody would take let's just switch it and not put systems around what happens between the seasons, because that's a lot of coding too.
Right. And I think that's why Crowfall and Ashes are tending to stick with we're just going to take it down during maintenance.
Yeah,
but Chronicles of Illyria is going a different route because they're expecting snow to affect gameplay, because again, that game is more about survival, because there is permadeath in that game as well. Like your character can literally die, and then your soul has to be reincarnated in a new character. You don't have all your same skills, etc. So
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's neat. But I can see why the two changes, like you said. What are they trying to achieve versus what are they, what will accomplish the point, but maybe not with as much flair. I'm here.
What's a nice to have?
Yeah, it's a nice to have. Quite honestly, I would love to see the snowfall and the weather change gradually. Even in games like The Witcher, when a storm was coming up, you could feel I think that was probably one of the most immersive experiences I think I've ever had, where I just had the sound all the way up, right? I'm playing The Witcher. The thunderstorm came. The trees are swaying. They're creaking. And I'm like, oh, dear heaven, I'm going to die. That was so cool the very first time that happened to me. Because it was all sunny. All of a sudden, it started getting dark. Then you could hear the wind blowing, and then you see the trees start to slowly sway, and then more violently sway. And at that point, then you start hearing the pine trees cracking in the wind, and you're just like, ooh. That was neat. It was insanely immersive. But we know MMO players are stupid. and don't care about that stuff, and generally turn all in-game sounds and music off, which is, to me, baffling. Why would you want to take away from the ambiance? But a lot of people do. They're too busy listening to their Japanese anime rap or whatever. I don't know. I just threw that out there. To pay attention to what the actual game developers are trying to present, which is an entire package. Infuriates me. Yeah, but anyway, as I was saying, maybe it's just not worth it for Ashes to go that extra step when all they're trying to accomplish is in the winter. Well, now the environment's changed a little bit. Now you'll be able to access that river you couldn't before. You know, does anyone care? In a game where there's not really effects for winter, like, I don't believe they've even said we're going to have negatively affecting things for winter time. Like, you're not going to have to put on furs and whatnot. You'll still be able to run around in your chainmail bikinis, even though they say they're not going to do that. But I've seen their art direction they've been going lately. They're probably going to go that way.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I'll complain about art direction another show. There's really no point other than the aesthetic flair. And then, hey, that cave now opened up. You know, great. You can accomplish that with a maintenance, and most people won't know or care.
Exactly, and then most minimal viable product. That's the way they're going to head, right? They're going to take what the minimum to get them where they need to go.
Right, and that's what an indie MMO needs to do. The minimal they don't have the money to go the big flare. Not in most cases, they don't. While it would be great to have that, Chronicles of Illyria says this is important to our gameplay because of the type of game we are, which is survival. We want this. We want it when it starts to snow and starts to accumulate. You go, oh crud! Start looking in your bag. Did I bring the jacket? Did I bring the jacket? Did I bring? Oh,
do I have the matches?
Yeah. Do I have the matches? Yeah. That kind of stuff. Whereas Ashes is not trying to do that.
Yeah, no, interesting point.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think that's the end of our discussion for this week. We do have one question in the mailbag this week from an Alex Saunders. He goes, Ashes of Creation has talked a lot about a lot of their systems being in-depth, from their weapon system, how it modifies how you play, to customizing your weapon with things such as increased freeze effect, as well as how their crafting professions will have dials to augment the items you make. My question is this: do you think they will put in a good tutorial for people that might not be good with in-depth systems such as these? No. Yeah, I know it's an unpopular opinion, right? No. And the reason why I say this is because as you've seen the shift, and you guys can either agree or disagree with me after this, but my thought is they will probably give the basest, this is how you do it, and then leave the in-depth stuff to the community. Look at what ESO does. They don't have this in-depth guide. They're like, hey guys, by the way, here's I don't know, outfit system. You go to this place, you can change your outfit. And then so-and-so will release an entire guide of, hey, this is how you do all this. This is where you... Because they know the community's already going to do that. And that slowly changed. You see this over time. Those of us who went out and bought the original Ultima Online box, like the big one. No? Am I the only one?
No, I didn't.
Wow.
Yeah, but back then they had that. They had those huge manuals.
Yeah,
right?
like the manual was
but
this
then they
big.
shifted.
Yeah.
Then they shifted. So I remember the games that came on like 20 3.5-inch discs, right?
Well,
so, you have those manuals that were just huge that came with them, but over the 90s they got thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner.
Does anyone remember Prima guides?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I used to buy those all the time.
Oh yeah.
I think I have the original World of Warcraft one, Burning Crusade, and then they kind of stopped because that's when you start seeing the community. I don't know if it was just like an internet thing, like people didn't know how to do with their own website. I don't know. Like, it felt like once upon a time there were a few hubs of places that were run by companies, Alakazam, stuff like that were run by companies, and everyone just kind of went to those. Now it feels like as my generation, Alpha Soul's generation, half of Stormlord's generation is starting to get a little older, we're like, we know how to do that ourselves now. It's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not foreign to us because we've grown up with it. We know how to do it.
You don't need a GeoCities to set it up for you.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can
We'll just do it
Absolutely.
as we go. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's what you're going to see going forward. I don't think that game developers are going to waste their time with in-game tutorials other than the basest of this is how you do it. Even World of Warcraft now doesn't do that. They'll give you a summary of this is what the new system is, and then they rely.
It's a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of work to do those. That's what my wife actually does, not for games, but she's a technical writer, right? And run teams of them. And it takes hours and hours and hours and hours to get it right, to get it just perfect. It's just ridiculously. If you're going to spend, $100 on a game, and you to build it, obviously a smaller number, but if you're going, then you need to spend $20 just to write a manual for it.
Right.
I mean, that's a large chunk. So if you can take that expense and move it off, you're going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, because the players are going to do it anyway, and I can tell you.
That's right. And they'll do it better.
Yeah, they will. Because you have this crowdsourcing that you didn't have back in the early 90s and or late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know why.
right.
Only a few people kind of jumped on that, and then it's sort of moved on into more individualistic type stuff. I mean, even DCN for a time, I can tell you this, we used to have skill line guides for ESO and stuff like that. That was so much work to maintain.
It is a lot of work. Yeah, content is king because it takes so much work.
It does. And I mean, between running the shows, managing all of our websites that we do, doing interviews, streaming, stuff like that, and then also doing guides on top of it, all of us also then working 8 to 10 hours a day as well. It was a lot because every time a new patch came out, it got to the point where I was dreading new patches. I'd finish updating guides, and it's like, by the
new patch would come out.
Yeah, new patches out. I'm like, oh, come on, because you knew that that's what you were going to have to do. And to stay on top of it, the players would also have to get in there early. People would start doing stuff off the PTS, which then also changed because you couldn't also say that was going to be all the way to launch because half the time it changed. It's a lot, but I really don't think that there's going to be tutorials other than the basics of this is how you do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
And, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, on top of that, even things that I have just noticed, like games, like box games that you buy, don't have instruction manuals anymore.
Nope.
Like any of the Switch games that I bought, they don't have instruction manuals anymore. I just bought Mario Tennis. Nothing. It's just the little cartridge, and that's it.
Yep. No, they don't because they just it's a waste of time on their end. It's a waste of space in the box. And from why would they want someone to write that up when they could be working on the next system when a player will do it for free? And that's what you'll see. You'll find there's already a plethora of sites out there that are covering news, that are a few of them are already set up to do guide stuff. I know one in particular has already set up skill line guides, essentially from stuff they saw in the alpha, that was, streamed. They're like trying to break down the skills. So, I mean, you're already seeing that, and you will continue to see that because what's going to happen is once the game is out, the game doesn't want to tell you how to play because then if the website comes out and says as a paladin, this skill, then you go, well, clearly that's what you're favoring, and then you're not allowing anyone. So they won't take out and make that leap. They'll let players go, this is your optimal build. This is the cookie cutter. And then they'll go, man, we didn't say it. It's true, but we didn't say it,
It's true.
Yeah, you can't catch us with that. So that's kind of my thought. Do you guys have anything different, or you agree?
No, it's about the same.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
That shift has occurred, and there's no going back.
Right. Yep. And I mean, honestly, other than the basics of, hey, play with it. This is how you do it. This is what you do. I don't think you're going to see in-game tutorials be anything more than this is the system. This is how it works. They may help you. They may help you pick a few things. I know even ESO did this recently with their new player experience. You guys remember the morph choices? Which it kind of they added to help new players go, what should I pick? And it kind of guides you. I can tell you a few times it's already wrong. Like, it's told me, this is a good morph for you. And I looked at it going, I'm a stamina character, and that's a Magicka morph. What are you drunk? Like,
no, you're right.
It's just supposed to guide you based on how you're playing, you know, and trying to give you an idea if you're not really one of the big theory crafters. But I don't think we're gonna see that going forward. All right, guys, we've reached the end of the show, so obviously you can ask people to follow you where they can find you. So let's start with Alpha Soul.
Yeah, I can be found pretty much on the Dungeon Crawler Network Discord. If you look in the Hands of Fate channel, you can find me idling in there at any time. And you can also find me on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/DRACDOC, Drakdoc.
There you go. And Stormzlord.
No, you can find me in ESO, and now it's on Monday nights doing pledges until our mid-year mayhem comes up.
Oh, yeah!
Then you can Stormlord at Twitter. We have that. Also pop by Digital Paper Studios on Google Play Store. Hopefully within the month on Facebook as well. We'll be approved and be able to be in their game center. So we are looking forward to moving up with a new game and doing good.
Nice. Yeah, I've been grinding out dungeons in ESO, trying to get a new PvP set together for mid-year mayhem. That was such a fun event. Oh my goodness.
That's a blast. I have so much fun on that one.
Yeah, but I need a new build for Somerset. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_DCN, and of course on Discord. You can find me there as well. I don't even know what my name is. It's Aggelos. I'm in the official Ashes of Creation Discord. You'll find me there, as well as the DCN Discord, which you can find a link in the description below. Feel free to join us because, hey, that's what we're there for. We're a community Discord. Our guild's also there. You can check out our guild Hands of Fate, the Ashes of Creation chapter of the Dungeon Crawler Network, a gaming community forged by the listeners of our gaming podcast. We have created an amazing gaming community and family. You should come be a part of it. We cover a wide range of gaming preferences from PC to console. We have developed a community that ranges from the super casual to the cutting edge of hardcore players, and we strive to create an environment where we can support all play styles while we enjoy each other's company. Hands of Fate is a PvX guild based out of the North American Data Center with players from all over the world. We have scheduled events for each region's prime time. So if you're an EU or Oceanic resident but have enjoyed playing with us in the past, or maybe this will be your first time, we encourage you to join up. The guild's focus is on progression, raiding, small-scale PvE, crafting, gathering, node-based PvP, aka open world, and of course, community growth, which I think is probably one of our primary goals. You can follow everything else we do over at dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There you can find links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Be sure to check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/dungeoncrawlernetwork if you want to help support the show. You can also consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes so people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. Thank you for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes. We'll see you next time.